"Ma'am, there's a problem with your tickets." The flight attendant, a sharp-faced woman with a severe bun and an even more severe expression, stood rigid in the aisle, blocking their path. Her voice cut through the excited hum of the boarding plane, silencing the laughter of their twin daughters, 8-year-old Chloe and 8-year-old Zoe. Robert, still wrestling his carry-on into the overhead bin, froze. Beside him, Maria, already settling their youngest, 5-year-old Marcus, into his window seat, felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. "A problem?" Maria asked, her voice calm despite the sudden chill. She clutched the laminated boarding passes tighter. "We checked in online. Our seats are 12A, B, C, D, and E. Right here." She gestured to the row. The girls, their faces still bright with anticipation for their first family vacation to Disney World, looked up, their smiles faltering as they sensed the shift in atmosphere. Marcus, always more sensitive, pulled closer to Maria, his thumb finding his mouth. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Brenda, didn't even glance at the passes. Her gaze, sharp and dismissive, swept over their family. It lingered on Robert's worn but clean jeans, then on Maria's braided hair. "These tickets have been flagged," Brenda stated, her tone dripping with an icy authority that made the hairs on Maria's arms stand up. "There seems to be an issue with your payment and, frankly, your appearance." Robert stepped forward, his frame tall and broad, his movements slow and deliberate so as not to appear threatening. "What do you mean, flagged, and our appearance?" His voice was low, laced with a controlled anger that Maria knew well. He had built his small landscaping business from the ground up, brick by painstaking brick, always with a quiet dignity. To be spoken to like this in front of his children was a fresh wound. Brenda scoffed, a short, sharp sound that felt like a slap. "Look, I've seen it 100 times. People trying to board with discount fares, trying to sneak extras past us." Her eyes narrowed. "This isn't some Greyhound bus, sir. This is Transglobal Airlines. We have standards." Maria felt a tremor of pure indignation. Discount fares? They had spent months saving for this trip, months of extra shifts, of packing lunches, instead of buying them, of putting every spare dollar aside. These weren't just tickets, they were a dream realized, a promise to their children. "These are first-class tickets, ma'am," Maria corrected, her voice now edged with a steel she rarely showed. "Purchased with a credit card, full price, no discounts." Brenda merely smirked. "First class, you say? With those bags and those children?" Her eyes flicked dismissively to Chloe and Zoe, who were now holding hands, their bright curiosity replaced by confusion and hurt. Marcus, sensing the tension, started to whimper softly. A flush of heat spread across Robert's face, a slow burn of humiliation that went deeper than just this moment. He remembered countless times as a kid, being followed in stores, or the way certain teachers had looked at him like he was already destined for failure. This wasn't just about a flight, it was about the heavy, invisible weight of assumptions. "My children are well behaved," he said, his voice taut, "and our bags are within regulation. What exactly is the problem?" A few heads in the rows ahead had turned. Whispers started, a low murmur of curiosity and judgment. Maria felt exposed, their private humiliation becoming a public spectacle. "Please, ma'am," she pleaded, trying to keep her voice gentle for the girls. "We just want to get to our seats. Our kids are excited. Excited to cause a disturbance, it seems," Brenda retorted, crossing her arms. "I've been informed there was a commotion at the gate, something about loud children and a delay in boarding." Her gaze seemed to suggest they were inherently troublesome, a pre-packaged problem. Maria's eyes widened. "A commotion?" "My daughter Chloe dropped her teddy bear, and Marcus got startled for a second. We picked it up immediately. There was no delay." The injustice of the false accusation burned. They had always taught their children to be respectful, to be quiet in public spaces. This was a lie, a fabrication used to justify Brenda's prejudice. "Regardless," Brenda swept on, clearly uninterested in the truth, "security has been notified. We cannot allow passengers who cause disruptions to board." She pulled out a small handheld device, her fingers already tapping. "You'll have to step off the plane." Robert's jaw tightened. "Step off? On what grounds? We have done nothing wrong." He tried to keep his tone level, but the tremor in his voice was palpable. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a blatant act of discrimination, raw and ugly. He could feel the eyes of other passengers on them, some sympathetic, some annoyed, some simply curious. Chloe, usually the quieter twin, finally spoke up, her small voice trembling. "But we want to go to Disney World. Daddy promised." Her lower lip began to quiver. Zoe, always more dramatic, started to tear up, her face crumpling. Marcus, seeing his sisters upset, let out a loud sob. "See?" Brenda threw her hands up, exasperated. "Disruptive, right on cue." She looked around as if expecting the other passengers to confirm her judgment. I'm sorry, but for the comfort and safety of our other passengers, we must insist. You are offloaded. Maria felt a surge of protectiveness. Her children, her beautiful, innocent children, were being humiliated for nothing. You can't just offload us. These are valid tickets. We haven't broken any rules. Her voice rose, no longer able to keep the tremor at bay. This was the moment. The line had been crossed. Brenda's face hardened further. I can, and I am. This is my aircraft, and I determine who flies on it. She gestured to the open door of the plane. Now, please, for everyone's sake, gather your belongings and exit the aircraft. Her eyes held a chilling challenge, a silent dare for them to argue further. The weight of the moment pressed down on Robert and Maria, a suffocating blanket of unfairness. They looked at their children, their faces a mixture of confusion, fear, and budding heartbreak. This wasn't just a flight. This was their dignity, their family's pride, being stripped away piece by painful piece in front of strangers. Robert felt a raw, burning anger that threatened to erupt, but he knew instinctively that losing control would only play into Brenda's cruel narrative. He had to stay calm for his family, but the humiliation was a bitter taste in his mouth. Familiar heat, a burning knot in his chest flared in Robert. It was the same feeling he'd known as a boy, sitting in the back of the classroom watching the teacher's eyes skip over him when she called on other students. It was the silent dismissal, the quick judgment based on nothing but the color of his skin or the rough texture of his father's work clothes. He remembered his mother, gentle but firm, telling him, "Son, they might try to make you feel small, but your spirit is mighty. Never forget who you are." He'd carried those words with him every single day, from the sweltering summers spent mowing lawns for pocket money as a teenager, to the brutal winters clearing snow before dawn. Robert had learned the value of $1 earned through honest sweat. His hands, now calloused and strong, told the story of a life built with grit and determination. He hadn't inherited wealth or connections. He'd forged his own path, piece by painful piece. Maria, beside him, reached for his hand, her touch a silent anchor. He squeezed back, finding strength in her unwavering presence. She understood. She always had. They met in college, two ambitious young people from different towns but with the same fierce desire to prove themselves, carve out a life bigger and brighter than what some might have expected for them. They had dreamed of a future where their children would never have to feel the sting of prejudice, where opportunity was truly open to all. He thought of his grandfather, a sharecropper in the Deep South, who had worked sunup to sundown, his back bent, his spirit unbroken. Grandpa Johnson had saved every penny not for himself, but for his children's education, insisting they go north, that they get a fair shake. Robert's father, a quiet, diligent man, had been the first in their family to own his own home, a small brick house that represented decades of sacrifice. Every nail hammered, every bush planted in his own landscaping business had been a tribute to that lineage of struggle and triumph. This trip to Disney World wasn't just a vacation, it was a symbol. It was a celebration of 10 years since Robert had launched Green Horizon Landscaping, a company that started with one battered pickup truck and a dream. It was the culmination of countless late nights poring over invoices, early mornings haggling for supplies, and the constant hustle to earn every single client. Maria, too, had poured her heart into it, managing the books, answering phones, and cheering him on through every setback. They had promised Chloe, Zoe, and Marcus this trip for years. Chloe had a scrapbook filled with Disney characters. Zoe hummed theme park songs in her sleep, and little Marcus talked about meeting Mickey Mouse every single day. Seeing their faces light up when they finally held the boarding passes, seeing the pure, unadulterated joy in their eyes, that was his real reward. That was what he was fighting for now. To protect that joy, that innocence from the ugliness of the world, to have it threatened, to be dismissed and humiliated like this, for no reason other than baseless assumptions, felt like a direct attack on everything they had built. It wasn't just about missing a flight. It was about the years of effort, the quiet pride, the determination to rise above. It was about the fundamental human right to be seen, to be respected, and to exist without constant scrutiny and judgment. His mind flashed to the previous year, when a bank manager had questioned his loan application for new equipment, scrutinizing his balance sheets with a suspicious eye despite his perfect credit history. "We just need to be sure about your capital," the manager had drawled, clearly implying more than just numbers. Robert had calmly provided every document, every receipt, every tax record. He had gotten the loan, but the memory of that condescending tone still pricked at him. This was no different. It was the tired old narrative trying to play out again. The assumption that he, a black man, and his family somehow didn't belong in certain spaces. didn't deserve certain privileges, but Robert wasn't that young man anymore, quietly accepting the slight. He had responsibilities now, not just to himself, but to the 3 sets of innocent eyes watching him, depending on him to navigate this unfairness. Maria's grip tightened, a silent reminder that they were a team. He looked at Marcus, his lower lip trembling, his little hand reaching for Maria's arm, then at Chloe and Zoe, their excitement replaced by wide, fearful eyes. He couldn't let this woman, with her narrow mind and prejudiced gaze, steal their magic, shatter their dreams. He couldn't let them internalize the message that they were somehow lesser, that they didn't belong. This wasn't just about their vacation anymore. This was about their sense of worth, their right to occupy any space with their heads held high. This was about fighting for the future, so his children wouldn't have to fight the same battles. It was about ensuring that the next generation of Johnsons and Roberts knew that dignity was non-negotiable. He took a deep breath, the anger still simmering, but now laced with a steely resolve. He wouldn't yell, he wouldn't lose his temper, but he wouldn't back down either. Not now, not ever. "I'm going to ask you one more time to step off the aircraft," Brenda stated, her voice rising, drawing even more attention. She held her device up, ready to tap. "If you refuse, I will have no choice but to involve airport authorities. That means delays, potential fines, and a permanent ban from transglobal airlines." The threat hung in the air, cold and calculated. Robert's hand tightened on Maria's. He could feel his blood pressure rising, the familiar pressure behind his eyes. He looked around. Some passengers averted their gaze, uncomfortable. Others watched, their faces a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled impatience. A few seemed openly annoyed by the delay. No one spoke up. No one offered a glance of support. The silence of the other passengers was almost as heavy as Brenda's words. "This is ridiculous," Maria finally managed, her voice trembling with the effort to remain calm. "We have our tickets, we have our IDs. What exactly is the issue?" She held out her driver's license, then Robert's, along with the stack of 5 first-class boarding passes. "Look at these. They're valid. Our names match. Our seats are right here." Brenda waved a dismissive hand. "We have systems for a reason, ma'am. And when the system flags something, it flags it for a reason. I don't need to explain company policy to every passenger who tries to skirt the rules." Her eyes narrowed, focusing on Robert. "Sir, I've seen your type before. Always trying to play the victim when they're caught red-handed." Robert felt a wave of nausea. "My type?" he repeated, his voice dangerously low. It wasn't a question. It was a challenge. That casual, racist insinuation, thrown out like a piece of trash, ignited a fury within him that he fought desperately to control. He saw the flash of recognition in Maria's eyes, the shared understanding of the ugly undertone. "Yes, your type. The kind that thinks they can strong-arm their way into places they don't belong," Brenda retorted, her tone sharp, as if daring him to react. "The kind that gets loud and aggressive when they don't get their way." She was painting a picture, a narrative that fit her prejudice, a classic stereotype designed to corner him. "I am not loud. I am not aggressive," Robert stated, his voice firm, unwavering. "I am calmly asking why my family is being discriminated against." He emphasized the word discriminated, letting it hang in the air, hoping it would prick the conscience of anyone on the plane. But still, no one intervened. Brenda let out a short, mirthless laugh. "Discrimination? That's rich. We're talking about standard procedure here. You're causing a scene, holding up the flight, and upsetting paying customers." She gestured to the rows of seated passengers as if they were all her personal witnesses to his supposed misconduct. "We are the paying customers," Maria exclaimed, her voice cracking. Her face was flushed, tears welling in her eyes, not from weakness, but from sheer frustration and hurt. "We paid good money for these tickets, for our children to have this trip." She looked at Chloe and Zoe, who were now openly crying, their small bodies shaking with silent sobs. Marcus, frightened by the rising voices, buried his face in her side. "Your children are a clear disruption, ma'am," Brenda said, her voice devoid of any sympathy. "Their crying alone is enough to warrant removal. We cannot have passengers disturbing the peace of the cabin, especially in first class." She paused, her eyes scanning the family again, a look of smug superiority on her face. "Frankly, first class isn't for everyone. Some people just aren't suited for it." This cut deeper than any direct insult. It wasn't just about their current behavior. It was an attack on their very identity, their perceived social standing. It was a thinly veiled declaration that they, as a black family, did not belong in a space of luxury and privilege. "Are you saying we're not suited because we're black?" Robert asked, his voice now a low rumble, the controlled anger barely contained. He looked her directly in the eye, challenging her to say it aloud, to expose the raw prejudice that underpinned Her actions. Brenda flinched slightly, her confident facade wavering for a split second, but she quickly recovered. I am saying nothing of the sort. I am stating facts. You are being disruptive, your tickets are flagged, and you are refusing to comply with crew instructions. She pointed a finger at him. This is your last warning. Off the plane. Now. Just then, a male voice from behind Brenda spoke up. Is everything all right here, Brenda? It was the captain, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, emerging from the cockpit, looking concerned. Brenda immediately softened, her tone becoming deferential. Captain Miller, thank goodness. We have a rather difficult situation. These passengers are refusing to deplane. Their tickets appear to be invalid and their children are causing a significant disturbance. She painted a picture of unruly, dishonest passengers, conveniently omitting her own discriminatory behavior. Captain Miller looked at Robert and Maria, then at their crying children. His expression shifted to one of slight unease. Invalid tickets? He asked, then turned back to Brenda. Did you verify with gate? I have, and security has been notified. We need them removed before we can push back, Brenda asserted, her voice now filled with a sense of urgency, framing the family as the sole reason for any delay. She had turned their humiliation into a logistical problem for the entire flight. Robert stepped forward, ignoring Brenda, and addressed the captain directly. Captain, with all due respect, this flight attendant is making false accusations. Our tickets are valid. My children are upset because they're being unjustly accused and told they can't go on their vacation. We have done nothing to warrant being removed from this flight. Captain Miller hesitated, glancing between the distraught family and the resolute flight attendant. He was clearly trying to assess the situation, but Brenda's confidence and official tone seemed to sway him. Ma'am, sir, I understand this is upsetting, but flight safety and cabin order are paramount. If the flight attendant has identified a disruption, I'm afraid we have to follow protocol. The helplessness washed over Robert. The captain, the ultimate authority on the plane, was siding with Brenda. Was the system once again closing ranks against them? The feeling of being cornered, of having no recourse, was crushing. So you're just going to take her word for it? Maria asked, her voice a raw whisper of disbelief. Without even looking at our tickets? Without asking us what happened? Brenda is a senior flight attendant, ma'am. Judgment is usually sound, Captain Miller replied, his tone apologetic but firm. I'm sorry, but we can't delay the entire flight. You'll need to disembark. He gestured vaguely towards the front of the plane. Public humiliation was complete. Every eye on them, every whisper now a judgment, every averted gaze a silent confirmation that they were indeed the problem. Robert felt the weight of decades of racial injustice pressing down on him. Heavy, suffocating blanket. Looked at his daughters, faces streaked with tears, dreams crumbling before their eyes. Sheer agony of not being able to protect them from this raw public cruelty twisted in his gut. Fine, Robert said, his voice surprisingly steady, though it cost him every ounce of his self-control. He looked at Brenda, his gaze unwavering, betraying no emotion. You will get off your plane. This is not over. Words were not a threat, but a promise delivered with a quiet, chilling certainty that made Brenda blink. He reached for Maria's hand, pulling their children close. Chloe clung to his leg, burying her face in his jeans. Zoe held Maria's hand, tears streaming down her face. Marcus, still whimpering, pressed his face into Maria's shoulder. They were being paraded off the plane, a spectacle of unfairness, every step a hammer blow of indignity. As they slowly, painstakingly made their way down the narrow aisle, collecting their small carry-ons, the silence of the other passengers was deafening. It was the silence of unspoken judgment, of complicity, of people unwilling to challenge what was clearly wrong. Robert felt a profound sense of isolation, but also a rising tide of resolve. This humiliation would not stand. Not today. Not for his family. Brenda stood triumphantly by the boarding door, her face a mask of smug satisfaction as Robert, Maria, and their 3 weeping children made their slow, agonizing procession off the plane. The captain had retreated to the cockpit, and the remaining passengers had begun to settle back into their seats, a collective sigh of relief whispering through the cabin that the problem had been dealt with. Brenda had proven her authority, her standards upheld. She beamed, basking in the perceived validation of her actions. But as Robert stepped onto the jet bridge, he stopped. He hadn't planned it. It was an instinct, a sudden, quiet shift in his entire being. He didn't turn to face Brenda directly, but his voice, clear and steady, carried back into the aircraft. "Excuse me, Captain Miller," he called out, not loud, but with an undeniable resonance that cut through the renewed hum of the plane. "Before we fully disembark, I believe there's one final protocol that needs to be followed." Brenda scoffed, rolling her eyes. There's no further protocol, sir. You are offloaded. Your situation will be handled by ground staff. She made a shooing motion with her hand, eager to close the door and finally push back. Oh, but there is, Robert countered, his voice still calm but now with an underlying current of steel that made Brenda pause. He didn't raise his voice, yet every word seemed to echo. As a senior member of Transglobal Airlines, I believe I'm entitled to a formal incident report from the cabin crew. Brenda frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion. Senior member? Sir, you are a passenger who has been removed. You have no standing. Her tone was sharp again, laced with impatience. Robert finally turned, his gaze meeting hers, not with anger, but with an unnerving composure that stripped away her smugness. On the contrary, Ms. Brenda, I have significant standing. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing a sliver of doubt to creep into her confident posture. Then, slowly, deliberately, Robert reached into the inner pocket of his worn, but impeccably tailored jacket. Maria watched him, a glimmer of understanding dawning in her eyes. The girls, their sobs subsiding into hiccuping breaths, looked up at their father, sensing the shift in his demeanor. He didn't pull out a wallet or a second set of tickets. Instead, his fingers closed around a sleek black leather card holder. From it, he smoothly slid out a single card. It wasn't a credit card or a driver's license. It was a corporate ID badge made of high-quality plastic, gleaming subtly under the jet bridge lights. Brenda's eyes narrowed, ready to dismiss it as some kind of fake or a low-level employee ID. But then, as Robert held it up, facing her, the words and the logo became undeniably clear. Emblazoned across the top, in the iconic silver lettering of Transglobal Airlines, were the words, Robert S. Johnson. Below his professional headshot, a picture of him smiling confidently wearing a crisp suit was his title, Chairman of the Board, CEO, Transglobal Airlines. A gasp rippled through the few passengers still within earshot at the front of the cabin. The flight attendant's jaw dropped. Her face, which moments ago had been radiating superiority, drained of all color, turning a ghastly shade of white. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, flickered from the ID card to Robert's calm, steady gaze, then back to the card. The silence that fell was absolute, heavy, and crushing. No more whispers, no more murmurs, just the faint hum of the aircraft's systems. It was the silence of a thunderclap, of a world suddenly inverted. Brenda's composure shattered. Her severe bun seemed to wilt, her rigid posture crumbling. She looked utterly, completely foolish, exposed in the harsh, unflinching light of the truth. The confident smirk she had worn for the past 15 minutes dissolved into a look of abject horror and utter disbelief. Robert, still holding the ID card, turned it slightly, allowing the Transglobal logo to catch the light. As chairman and CEO, he stated, his voice resonating with an authority that left no room for doubt. I am responsible for the standards of this airline, Ms. Brenda, and your conduct today falls woefully short of them. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't yelled, hadn't shown an ounce of the anger that had been simmering within him. His calm, almost detached delivery of the truth was far more devastating than any outburst could have been. Maria, standing beside him, felt a wave of relief so profound it nearly brought her to her knees. She squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with pride. Her children, their tears drying on their cheeks, looked up at their father with awe, their understanding of the moment slowly dawning. The little boy who was once followed in stores, the landscaper who built his company from nothing, was now the highest authority on this airline. Brenda, completely stunned, could only stammer, Mr. J. Johnson, I mean, sir, this is a mistake. Her voice was a pathetic whisper, completely devoid of its former arrogance. Her eyes darted frantically around, seeking an escape, a way to reclaim her shattered dignity, but there was none. The few passengers who had heard and witnessed the reveal now exchanged shocked glances. A woman in the row directly behind Brenda covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide. A man further back let out a low whistle of astonishment. The shame of what they had just allowed to happen, of their silent complicity, washed over them. Robert put the ID card back into its holder, a slow, deliberate movement that felt weighted with significance. No, Ms. Brenda, he said, his voice softer now but no less firm. The only mistake made here was yours, a grave one. He didn't need to yell, he didn't need to boast. The simple, irrefutable truth of his identity had done all the work. The arrogant flight attendant who had judged and humiliated his family was now a small, pathetic figure caught in the harsh glare of her own prejudice. Her confidence was not just shattered, it was annihilated. Brenda stood frozen, her mouth slightly agape, the color still drained from her face, her eyes wide and disbelieving, darted from Robert to Maria, then back to the closed cockpit door, as if hoping for a miraculous escape. The few passengers who had witnessed the reveal were now openly staring, their previous impatience replaced by shock and a dawning understanding of the immense wrong they had just seen. The air crackled with a tension far greater than before, a palpable shift in power that left Brenda gasping for breath. Robert took a slow, deliberate step back towards the aircraft door, drawing Maria and the children with him. He didn't rush, his movements calm and purposeful. Chloe and Zoe, still clutching their parents, looked up, their tears beginning to dry as they watched their father, seeing a strength in him they hadn't fully grasped before. Marcus, sensing the change, slowly lifted his head from Maria's shoulder, his little eyes wide with innocent curiosity. "Miss Brenda," Robert began, his voice clear and measured, "you made several assumptions today. Assumptions about my family, about our worth, and about our right to occupy this space." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the plane's interior, and settling back on her. "You assumed that because of our appearance, because of the color of our skin, we were somehow less deserving. You assumed we were disruptive, invalid, not suited for your first class." Brenda tried to speak, a choked sound escaping her lips, but no words formed. She swallowed hard, her eyes pleading, desperate. "You called my children disruptive," Robert continued, his voice unwavering, "when they were simply expressing the excitement of a dream vacation, a dream we saved and worked tirelessly for." His eyes softened as he looked at his daughters, then hardened as he returned his gaze to Brenda. "You created a scene, Ms. Brenda, not us. You fueled a false narrative. You publicly humiliated my family based on your own preconceived notions." He took another step closer now to the threshold of the plane, to the very spot where she had stood rigid and accusatory moments ago. "Transglobal Airlines prides itself on being an airline for all people. We preach inclusivity, respect, and a commitment to customer service that extends to every single passenger, regardless of their background, their appearance, or their perceived social standing." He didn't yell, he didn't raise his voice. His words were precise, cutting, each one landing with the weight of undisputed truth. He wasn't fueled by revenge, but by a profound sense of justice, by the need to right a wrong that had scarred his family. "What you demonstrated today, Ms. Brenda," Robert articulated, his voice resonating with quiet authority, "was the antithesis of everything this company stands for. You displayed blatant prejudice, complete lack of empathy, and an alarming abuse of power." He saw her flinch, her shoulders slumping. Her face was a mask of utter mortification. Just then, the cockpit door opened again and Captain Miller emerged, looking bewildered and concerned, having clearly heard the murmurings and the sudden, chilling shift in atmosphere. He saw Brenda's distraught face, then his eyes landed on Robert, whose quiet dignity now filled the space. "Mr. Johnson?" Captain Miller stammered, recognizing the name and the man from official company emails and directives. His face paled visibly. "Sir, I apologize. I had no idea. I was simply following procedure." "Procedure, Captain, should never be an excuse for prejudice," Robert interrupted, his voice firm but not accusatory. He wasn't interested in shaming the captain, but in delivering a clear message. "My family and I were targeted, humiliated, and nearly removed from a flight we lawfully boarded, simply because a member of your crew decided we didn't belong." He turned his full attention back to Brenda, who was now trembling. "Ms. Brenda, effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties on this flight." The words were delivered with a calm finality that brooked no argument. "You will not be flying with us today. You will escort my family back onto this aircraft, assist them in settling into their seats, and then you will proceed to the nearest gate supervisor's office." Brenda's eyes darted wildly, desperate. "Sir, please, I made a mistake, a terrible mistake." Her voice was a broken whisper, filled with genuine terror. The arrogance, the smugness, had completely evaporated, replaced by raw fear. "Yes, Ms. Brenda, you did," Robert confirmed, his gaze unwavering. "And mistakes of this magnitude, mistakes that inflict such pain and damage, have consequences." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle upon her. "Your employment with Transglobal Airlines will be reviewed thoroughly starting this very moment. I assure you we will investigate every detail of your conduct today." He watched as her face crumpled, as her entire body seemed to deflate. She didn't argue. She didn't protest further. She simply stood there, choking on the bitter taste of her own shame and the sudden crushing reality of her actions. The woman who had been so arrogant, so dismissive, was now reduced to a broken shell. Maria, watching Brenda's complete downfall, felt a rush of complex emotions, not triumph but a profound sense of sorrow for the prejudice that drove such actions, and a quiet, fierce pride in Robert. He wasn't celebrating, he wasn't gloating. He was simply holding a mirror up to injustice, letting it reflect its own ugliness. Robert turned to Captain Miller. "Captain, I trust you will ensure Ms. Brenda complies with my instructions." He then looked to the passengers who had witnessed everything. Their faces were a mixture of shock, regret, and a newfound respect. He didn't need their applause, their cheers, or their apologies. Their silent acknowledgement of the truth was enough. With a calm, steady hand, Robert gestured towards their first-class seats. "Girls, Marcus," he said, his voice gentle. "Let's go. Our vacation is still on." Chloe and Zoe, their eyes wide with understanding, let out little gasps of relief and excitement. Marcus, still unsure, but sensing the shift from fear to safety, giggled softly. They walked back onto the plane, not in humiliation but in quiet triumph, their heads held high. Brenda, her face pale and drawn, moved mechanically. She led them back to their seats, her former rigid posture now a defeated slump. As they settled into 12A, B, C, D, and D, she offered a meek, barely audible, "My apologies," before turning and walking stiffly towards the front of the plane, disappearing through the cockpit door without another word. The remaining flight attendants, who had observed the entire exchange from a distance, exchanged nervous glances, their faces reflecting the profound impact of the moment. Robert settled into his seat, Maria on one side, Marcus on the other. Chloe and Zoe, their tears now completely gone, snuggled into their seats, already whispering excitedly about Disney World. The flight, delayed for nearly 20 minutes by Brenda's prejudice, finally began to push back from the gate. He looked out the window as the ground crew began their final checks. The rage, the humiliation, the helplessness he had felt moments ago were replaced by a quiet, deep satisfaction. He hadn't fought with anger, but with dignity. He hadn't sought revenge, but justice. And in doing so, he had protected his family, not just from a ruined vacation but from the insidious lie that they were anything less than worthy. He had shown his children, and every person on that plane, that true power lay not in loud aggression, but in unwavering self-respect and the undeniable truth of one's own worth. The aircraft hummed, a gentle, reassuring vibration as it climbed higher into the clear blue sky, leaving behind the terminal, the gate, and the stark reality of the recent confrontation. Inside, the cabin lights glowed softly, illuminating the faces of passengers who, having just witnessed a profound and humbling display of justice, now sat in contemplative silence. The air, once thick with tension and prejudice, was now filled with the quiet murmur of reflection. For Robert and Maria, settling back into their seats, the relief was immense, a warm wave washing over the raw edges of the humiliation they had just endured. Chloe and Zoe, already distracted by the promise of the journey, pressed their noses against the window, pointing out the shrinking buildings below. Marcus, finally content, snuggled into Maria's lap, his small body a comforting weight. Their innocence, momentarily threatened, had been restored, a testament to the quiet strength of their parents. But the incident wasn't just about a flight to Disney World. It was a stark reminder of the invisible battles fought every single day, in countless unspoken ways. It was a mirror held up to the insidious nature of judging by appearances, a pervasive issue that still grips society. Brenda, the flight attendant, hadn't needed a single fact to form her opinion. She had seen a black family, assumed discount fare and disruptive children, and acted on deeply ingrained biases that are often unconscious yet inflict real, tangible harm. This wasn't an isolated incident for Robert or Maria. It was a recurring theme, a familiar echo of a systemic problem that permeates institutions and interactions, from banking and housing to everyday encounters in public spaces. It's the subtle shift in tone, the quick, dismissive glance, the assumption of guilt or lesser standing, all rooted in a historical narrative that continues to cast shadows. It's the constant need to prove one's worth, to justify one's presence even when simply existing. Robert's journey from a hard-working landscaper to the CEO of a major airline was a testament to sheer resilience and determination. Yet even with that monumental achievement, he was still vulnerable to the snap judgments of a flight attendant. His success, his power, his inner worth were completely invisible to someone blinded by prejudice. This story, therefore, isn't just about one family's triumph. It's about the countless individuals who are judged, dismissed, and held back because their true story, their true strength, is obscured by superficial assumptions. The satisfaction felt by those who witnessed the showdown wasn't just about seeing Brenda get her comeuppance. It was a deeper, more primal response to seeing a clear wrong being righted, to witnessing dignity powerfully asserted against baseless discrimination. It was a moment that underscored a fundamental truth. Respect is not a privilege to be earned by a select few. It is an inherent right belonging to every single human being. The way Robert handled the situation, without anger, without shouting, without seeking petty revenge, was the true climax. He didn't stoop to Brenda's level. He confronted her with the unassailable truth of who he was and what she represented. He allowed her to choke on her own shame, forcing her to confront her prejudice directly, without allowing her the comfort of a heated argument. This quiet, dignified defiance was far more impactful than any outburst. It showed that true strength lies not in aggression, but in composure, integrity, and an unwavering belief in one's own worth. This story urges us to look beyond the surface, to challenge our own biases and to remember that every individual carries a complex, multifaceted story within them. You can't see a person's story in their skin or their clothes or their immediate circumstances. You can only see it in their strength, their character, their resilience, and the quiet dignity with which they navigate the world. And it delivers a powerful, undeniable message that resonates deeply within the fabric of American society. Respect is a right, never a request. It is something that should be freely given, not begrudgingly granted. And when it is denied, when dignity is challenged, the fight to reclaim it is not just personal. It is a battle for the fundamental values of fairness and equality that we, as a society, claim to uphold. This family's flight was about more than a vacation. It was a journey through prejudice, a quiet battle for justice, and ultimately, a triumphant assertion of inherent human worth. This story is a powerful reminder that prejudice still exists, often hidden but always hurtful. We've seen how quickly assumptions can lead to pain, and how true dignity shines brightest in the face of injustice. If you've ever felt the sting of being judged for who you are, or if you believe that respect is a fundamental right for every person, we want to hear from you. Share your experience in the comments below, and let your voice add to the chorus that demands dignity for all. If this story resonated with you, and if you stand for a world where worth is never questioned by appearance, hit like and subscribe for more real stories that matter, stories that challenge us, inspire us, and remind us of the battles that still need to be fought.